I'd like to just start by saying that I am an incredibly ordinary person who's had an extraordinary life thus far, and I hope to continue to have the experiences that are just, superlative. I mean, here's a refugee somehow in the White House having tea with Laura Bush, things like that, or having my shoes in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., or meeting Oprah. I mean, it's just an incredible life that I've had. And if I look back, I'd say that it was because I was very lucky and I was incredibly prepared for that luck. I think you have to have both. Even the example of leaving Vietnam, we were very fortunate that we were able to leave on an airplane. My father happened to know the ambassador, and he arranged for us to leave. And getting out, even in that route, was harrowing because my father was not allowed to leave. He was of military age and a male. So he had to disguise himself as a woman, wearing a woman's hat and blouse, and he carried my two sisters down the tarmac to board the cargo plane, disguised as a woman. So he could have been discovered at any point in time and stopped. So it was incredible luck that we were able to leave unharmed. Juxtapose that to a Vietnamese entrepreneur that I just met last week, who his family was one of the wealthiest family in the country, and the fortune was built by his mother. And 3 days before the fall of Saigon, the same day I left, his mother gave premature birth to one of his siblings. So they couldn't leave despite all the money. And he ended up leaving Vietnam on a boat by himself at the age of 16 with only his sister, and coming to the U.S. Just with his sister. So I look at that and I think at every step of the way I needed that luck. When we got to Wake Island, we were asked to sign up for the various refugee camps around the country, and my father said, let's go to California, to Camp Pendleton, because we know some people there. And so we were so excited when the plane finally landed on U.S. soil, and we were so looking forward to seeing California. Unfortunately, we were in Arkansas. And they said, get out. And the catch-22 with being in a refugee camp is that you have to get sponsored to get out. So I challenge most of us in this room now, if we were dropped off in Arkansas at this moment and had to find someone who would sign to be financially responsible for you, imagine what that would be like. Well, that's what my parents were facing. And I think I definitely learned the lessons of networking and persistence from this very first experience, because what my dad had to do, since he did not know anyone in Arkansas, I actually have friends in Arkansas like the Dillards now, but back then he didn't know anyone. So he went to the phone booth and started cold calling doctors. He's a doctor. So he said, well, there's a common bond here, so maybe I can find someone that will sponsor us. And so there goes the second challenge. Have you ever tried calling a doctor's office and getting to the doctor? Well, he got lucky, and the wife of the doctor answered the phone in one of his cold calls. And she said, well, let me talk to my husband, and I'll call you back tomorrow. Well, he was at a phone booth. So the next day at the camp, he's fending people off, trying to keep people off the phone booth. And here's the other challenge. How many times people have said, I'll call you back, and they actually do? And yet this Mrs. Koenig called back when she said she would, and she said, okay, we will sponsor your family out. So think of all the lucky elements that happened there. And then to sort of, as the bonus, he wasn't just an ordinary doctor. He owned a third of the hospital in that small town of Fort Smith, Arkansas. So, and they owned real estate all over the town. So they set us up in one of their rentals, and my father got a job in the hospital. So it all went quite smoothly, but incredibly lucky. We were there for 2 years, and I actually learned English so well that I have a southern accent, and when I go down to the south, it still comes back. Then we moved to California, where I had, before that we went to Columbia, Missouri for my father's residency in pathology. And there I learned the lesson of persistence again, in the sense of, you know, I was a kid who wanted to fit in, so I tried out for the cheerleading team. And when I made it, and when I told my dad, he's like, "You're not going to be a cheerleader. I don't want you on the sidelines. I want you to participate in the sport." So I'm like, great, there goes my chance of being popular. And I'm thinking, well, what can I do where I can wear a cute outfit? I mean, it was all about the outfit, you know? So I decided on tennis, because they at least had their cute little skirts. And you'll find that one of the things is I make a lot of decisions based on fashion. So, okay, never mind that I had never played tennis before. That didn't stop me. That just sort of was not a deciding factor. So I went up to the tennis coach and I said, "Coach, if you let me, if you can just teach me some lessons and just let me hang out with the team, I'll do all the assistant work. I'll pick up balls, whatever you want me to do. Oh, and can you give me a ride home?" Because my mother said, "Anything that you do other than school, I don't want any part of it. You've got to manage it on your own. Get your own ride." So that's how I got started in tennis, and the following summer, I did the next most difficult thing, was to find somebody who would actually play with me in the middle of the summer heat. And it was the coach's son. And why did I have to play in the middle of the day? I just thought that that would make me stronger than the rest of the girls who were at the country club sitting by the pool. Because I wanted to not only make the team, but be, you know, further along in the rankings. So the following season, I did make the JV team, and I did have to go to the prom with the son, though. But he was a good sport, because it was like 100 degrees and so humid out there. Then we moved to California, where I actually went to CIF in tennis. And it was the lesson out here, though, of interpersonal skills, because being an interloper in high school, can you imagine this, you know, they had their clique, and here I came and basically disrupted the entire ranking on the team. And I had to, for the first time, learn how to manage a social situation. And then from there, I went to UC Irvine, where I learned about the competitiveness of entering medical school. I ended up at USC Medical School. Pretty uneventful. I was the kind of kid who I liked to study visually, so I would just study off notes most of the time. So I was not at the top of the class. I wasn't at the bottom of the class. I was sort of like the B medical student. But I decided, I got into my head that I wanted to be an orthopedic surgeon, because I met Dr. Wyss, who was one of the top traumatologists in the country, and I just really admired his passion for the work, and just, there was something about him that I admired his sense of control, and, you know, we're going to fix people. Because originally I had gone into medical school thinking that I would become a dermatologist and then create my own skincare line. This was before this was popular. And the reason I thought that is to support myself during college. I sold cosmetics for Estee Lauder, and I was really good at it. And I set up systems like registry systems for my regular clients, and they would send their husbands in for birthdays and holidays and things like that. So I made very good money, and I just had a knack for the marketing side. So I thought, okay, this is my path. And then, lo and behold, I meet Dr. Wiss. Well, the thing with orthopedics is you have to be the top student to get in. So I'm like, okay, I'm not one of the top 10, so how am I going to show that I'm worthy? So every Saturday for 4 years, I was at morning conference at 7 a.m. So imagine I was 21, you know, a person in their 20s giving up, basically going out so that she could show up every Saturday morning at 7 a.m. for a conference. But what that did, that consistency and persistence did, was to convince one of the attendings to take me under his wings, and he ended up allowing me to write the exams for the other students. And so of course I passed with flying colors. I was able to convince the other attendings and the chairman that I was very serious about this goal. Now, that's not to say that I didn't have hurdles, because there was a letter that got circulated to the chairman by 3 of the male residents saying that he shouldn't accept me into the program because I wore my skirts too short. Again, with the fashion. And you know, 3 years later, one of the authors of that letter worked with me, and he, to his credit, because I never knew who wrote this letter, he came up to me and he's like, you know what, I have to apologize to you because I was one of the authors, and I have to say, you are the hardest working resident I've ever worked with, and I was completely wrong. So again, I was lucky in the sense that the chairman didn't listen to that. And I will try, I'm going to point out a lot of things that did go wrong too, because I really feel like that's where you can learn a lot. But I knew going into orthopedics that I'd have to work 150% to get maybe 50 to 75% of the credit. And that's really what I started to recognize, was that this was a field of 10% women. The rules of the games was set up for men, and I wanted to lead an extraordinary life. And I realized that I could go into a community practice and lead a very sort of calm, to me, ordinary life of a community orthopedic surgeon, which there's nothing wrong with that. I think, you know, for the right personality, that's the perfect thing for them to do. For me, it wasn't what I wanted. I wanted to change the world somehow. I wanted to leave a mark on the world. So what I did start to see was this need, because I wore fashion shoes too, and I was constantly fixing them and changing and padding and things like that to make them more comfortable, and seeing patients who were complaining of their feet, and even watching, for example, a woman post-surgery say to the surgeon, well, what shoes can I wear now? And he's like, oh, just wear tennis shoes, what's the big deal? And she just started crying. Yeah. And you know, she's like, how can I go to church now? So I realized that there was such a need, and at the time, there were shoes that were comfortable, but they were not of high quality, and they were very casual. So I also saw that there was just an increasing number of women in the workforce. Women were getting much busier. So I felt like, gosh, you know, this is a great opportunity. And it was a way for me to be who I am authentically and yet be extraordinary. If that makes any sense. And I used my weakness as a woman in orthopedics and changed it into a positive as a woman that created a fashion footwear line with the background in orthopedics, because that was a marketing angle that people really resonated with. And of course the product was very good, because I made sure that the product was of very high quality. So between those two elements, I was very fortunate where, you know, it was very successful. We grew very quickly. I started in '98, and by 2001, we were already at 8 million in sales. And then I was on Oprah, and that catapulted us to 16 million in sales the next year. And what I didn't know at the time was how difficult that was. I mean, looking back now, I'm like, oh my gosh, how did I not really appreciate how difficult it was to have those increases and to manage. And I grew the business organically. I didn't take in any outside investors until 2006, so 8 years into the business. And it was only then because I was at about 30 million in sales, and I got into my head that I wanted to go to 100 million, and you know, I didn't have enough capital to get it to that level. So that's, in a nutshell, my background. What I would like to focus more for this discussion is when I saw the topic, one of the quotes that I've read that really resonated with me was, happiness is not getting what you want, but liking what you have. And I have to say that in 2008, I got what I thought I wanted. I mean, I was traveling all over the world, staying in luxury hotels. I had every it bag there was. But I also had a work schedule that required me to travel 220 days out of the year. So that meant I saw very little of my 3 children. I was completely exhausted from trying to run everything. What I had was skin cancer. What I had was an extra 40 pounds than what I have now. What I also had was a husband who, when it came time for me to have a surgery, he pulled up to the front of the hospital and said, okay, just tell him to call me when to pick you up. So I reached, you know, in a period of about 6 months, I had several things that happened where I was like, wait a minute, this is really not the quality of life that I had hoped for. Yes, I've gotten what I wanted, but my God, you know, is this really how I want to live? And there were many reasons why I sold the company, but this was definitely one of them, was that I reached a point where I couldn't handle all of the pressures anymore, because I wasn't taking care of myself. I didn't have much support system. I think at that time there were 3 friends, true friends, that I could say I could call up and really talk to them about my problems, and that's it. I think now it's grown to about maybe 6 to 8, because those types of friends are very rare. So I sold the company in 2008, and again, sheer luck, we closed the deal 2 weeks before the Great Recession started. And it was because the negotiations had gone back and forth for 4 or 5 months, and I finally got tired and called up my attorney and said, you know, just agree to whatever the final details. I don't care. Just let them have it. I just want this deal closed. And thank God I did, because everything would have unraveled. So in the last 3 years, I've had a lot of time to think about what the quality of life is. And I don't know if this is where you'd like to start asking questions, or is this a good segue?
First of all, I just want to say I'm so honored to be able to do this, and I've just been completely mesmerized listening to you, because even in reading so many interviews, can you all hear me, by the way?
No.
We can't hear you. You can't.
We can't hear you.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes.
Let me just have it.
Maybe
Up higher.
yeah.
In reading so many interviews about Taryn, I just didn't even know so much of that. You know, so it's just so nice to hear it right out of your mouth, and you know, right here in front of you. And I just am so honored to be able to do this. I just have to start by saying that. Is that better?
No.
No? Okay. Hello? Can you hear me better now? Again, start by telling this funny little story. I have a very close friend who's an obstetrician gynecologist, and she told her parents when she was in high school that she wanted to be a fashion designer. You two would be very good friends. And they said, absolutely not, we're a family of doctors, you're going to medical school, don't even think about that. And she became an obstetrician. And I texted her on my way here and said, I just have to tell you I'm interviewing Karen Rose tonight. And she said, oh my gosh, that's amazing. She goes, you know, she was an orthopedic surgeon that saw a need and designed shoes. She said, I'm an obstetrician gynecologist, what can I design? She said, don't answer that. She like immediately did it, and I was laughing. But
my two best friends are OBs, and they've asked me that too.
You've heard that joke. I mean, I was like, that's just so funny, I have to share that with the whole group. But I want to hear more about those last 3 years. You know, I mean, it sounds like, you know, you had a lot of self-growth and probably a lot of exploration, and I want to hear from the moment you sold your company that you know, worked so hard to create and to grow. You know, did you immediately step away from the company? Was it a gradual I'm just curious a little bit about what it looked like from the day you closed.
Right.
You know.
Yes, I did step away from the company, and what it allowed me to do is I was running so fast building the company, and it was, yes, the growth was fantastic, but it meant so much work, just keeping up with the growth. I'd come back from a trip selling, and then having, you know, to answer calls about, okay, how are we going to finance the next production, and, you know, cash flow issues. I think any entrepreneur would be lying if they said, oh, we never had any cash flow issues. I mean, I think I even managed to somehow pay for one payroll cycle on my American Express card. You know, it's just crazy stories like that. I just always managed to do it. I mean, my 12-year-old daughter is in the back there, and she's my lucky baby because I remember the night before I gave birth to her, I was closing up the office at about 11 p.m. at night, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to get the cash to pay for the incoming shoe shipment? And then, you know, I went to labor, and she was born, and, you know, none of that mattered during those hours. And then my mother comes waltzing in and says, oh, the baby's so cute. And by the way, you know that stock that you've had for a long time that was only $2? It went up to 18 in the last 24 hours. And I was like, what? Sell it now. I need the cash. So that's why my daughter Annika is my lucky baby. So it was, when you hear the surface stories, yes, it's incredible. Everything that happened, and it certainly was. But behind the scenes, there was also a lot of stress, and I had no balance in my life at all, just running to keep it up. So I realized that I was working so hard to continually get more stuff because I thought that would make me happy, and yet my health and my personal relationships were crumbling. And I think on some unconscious level, I realized that that wasn't making me happy, so I would just try to buy more stuff. I mean, we were in those frenzy years. It was just it was non-ending. And then when I sold, there was no reason for me to really get dressed up because my excuse was, well, you know, I need the outfits to be out in public and all that. And then I realized, well, I don't really miss this. I started to live a healthier life. I started first by just decreasing my portion size, and then I started exercising on a regular basis and realized how great that felt. So I didn't need stuff as much because I was feeling good. I filed for divorce, and ironically, you're going to laugh at this. My employer said, you're going to get your final decree on February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day. And you know, I had time to spend with my children. I was able to take them to school, be a lot more involved. I'm in no way a perfect mom. I think I'm a better mother now because I'm the type of person that I don't really sing nursery rhymes. That's just not who I am. But I'm great at, you know, they're now 12, 6, and 7, so I love the conversations. I love hearing about what they're doing. Tonight we have to rush home because she's got to dress up as a refugee going to Ellis Island. So, you know, that I'm very interested in. So I was able to sort of correct my path and realize that all of the stuff that I was accumulating, which then created a situation where I felt like, okay, well, next year I have to make even more money to support this. I thought that was making me happy, and yet that wasn't. And so I had to get out of that vicious circle. And I feel like I'm much more balanced now. I also got caught up in that whole fashion Hollywood crowd of people who, you know, they didn't really talk about substantive things most of the time. And so I was intellectually eating junk food as well, not just for my body. And so I started hanging out with the technology crowd in town here, and really got my mind stimulated and very much more engaged intellectually. So, okay, that was my health, my relationships with my children, my friends. I'm a much better friend now than I was then. And also time for myself. I've discovered that I need alone time. I think all of us should have alone time, and some of us need it more than most. That makes it difficult to be married, I realize. So it wasn't always the ex's fault. It was, you know, just my personality. So I really like being alone, and it's when I'm alone that I can listen to my inner voice. It's when I can find that peace and contentment and acceptance. And when you talk about balance, I've figured out that balance is also, it's not just, okay, all these elements in your life, but it's how do you stay in the moment and yet still have a goal. So enjoying that journey, and yet having a worthwhile destination to get to. Because I've also met plenty of people who, they're just sort of floating, and they really don't have any sort of destination. But I find that to really be engaged in life, that's very fulfilling, and that's quality. So quality people is very important in a life full of quality too. And a friend of mine taught me this. You have to edit the people out of your life that are not of quality, because there's only so much time and energy you have. So I thought I was being nice, you know, by always being open and, oh yes, come over, yes, we can do that. I'm going to say no a lot more, because if you don't prioritize and give your time to the quality people, then all of the nonsense just takes over. And pretty soon you're exhausted, and you know, you're not as good of a friend, or you're not enjoying your time with the people that can add to your life as well as you can give. And I do believe in giving to others, definitely. But now I think I'm more nuanced in the sense that I give to those who I feel will also give back to others. It has to be a continuous cycle. It can't just, because there are people who will take, and take, if you're willing to give, and they don't contribute. And so I want to be with people who are innovators, who are contributors, and who are positive.
Absolutely, I would agree with that. I think that it's interesting. I always think about the phrase "what you water will grow." You know, and I think that that goes with like the people you spend time with. You know, who you spend, you know, where you put your efforts and your energy. It's interesting, the whole idea of editing and, you know, not keeping those people around. Well, I'm curious about your alone time, what you do to refuel yourself. You know, is that when you exercise or is it more meditative? You know, what it looks like.
Well, I'm very fortunate in the sense that every morning I take my children to the bus stop for school, and next to where they take the bus is a track. So I get a mile in either walking or jogging every morning, and then 3 times a week I go to the gym. But that's not really alone time. Alone time for me is when the children are in bed, and I'm sitting by myself, and I usually have my laptop with me, and I can, you know, just let my mind wander, or it could just be laying there silently, you know, letting ideas wash across me. Or I'm not perfect. I have guilty pleasures too. Like I just got done watching all of the Game of Thrones series. So it's, you know, it's relaxing time. Yeah. And when I have time on my own, then I can go out and be much more engaging and giving to others.
What you answered this a little bit when you talked about leaving your company, but on an ongoing basis, what do you think are a few important ways that you get the most out of life?
I think I mentioned that it's definitely to be a seeker, you know, to be continually curious about the world around you, and to surround you with quality people who you can have a substantive interaction with, and to be around kind people. As soon as I sense someone is unkind, I'm very fast now at saying, you know, out, edit. I definitely, of course, your health is important. And I think being comfortable with who you are. Again, it's that sense of acceptance, which is not to be complacent, but it's to say, this is what I have, and I like it. And that doesn't mean you don't have a goal going forward, but I think especially for women, we need to not be so hard on ourselves and hard on each other. When I was a working mom, it was really hard for me because most of the moms at my kids' schools don't work. And at first I felt a lot of tension, and it was very interesting. I figured out after a year that what I would do is I would call up the busiest of the stay-at-home moms who were more involved in school, and I would say to them, you know, I would really appreciate if you kept me in the loop. I'm really busy, and, you know, it would mean so much to me if you could kind of look out for me and tell me what I'm missing. I think that started the conversation of them saying, oh, she's not against us. And then the next phase was when the recession hit, some of these moms had to go back to work. And a couple of them came up to me and said, now I see how hard it was for you. You know, I appreciate what you were going through at the time. So I think it takes a village, and women are expected to look like Angelina Jolie, be as successful as Meg Whitman, you know, and have, you know, 3 kids. 3 is the new 2 these days. So there's just so much pressure. So I'd like to have less guilt and less envy and jealousy.
Great things to aspire.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely, especially amongst women.
Mm-hmm.
There should be more support. What do you do, speaking of your children and your school, what do you find is the best way to balance working, and, you know, whether it's volunteer work or, you know, work, and having children and being there for them?
You know, again, that comes from acceptance. I've realized I was never going to be the kind of mom that baked brownies and, you know, did that sort of stuff. But I do volunteer for things that fit my nature a bit more. For the charity events, I would go out and get stuff to sell, and so I would do things that comes more naturally to me instead of trying to fit into a mold that I'm not. But one of my mentors, Adrienne Hall, she created the first woman-owned advertising agency in the country, and she also had, I think, 6 children. 3 of them were adopted, and actually one of her daughters is my divorce attorney. So, I asked her once, I said, you know, do you ever feel guilty about not being there as much for your kids since you had such a big career? And she's like, no, you know, my kids didn't miss out on the fact that I didn't bake brownies, but they sure liked it when they were adults and I had a Rolodex that I could call up people and get them, you know, entry into whatever field they were trying to get into. So there's give and take. There's no free lunch, and you have to accept who you are. I think my kids accept who I am, and in fact, in some ways it's good because I am busy, so my kids tend to be quite independent. And I balance the, you know, once I said, Annika, how am I doing as a mom? And she said, you're good, Mom, you're not a helicopter mom. So,
Right.
So, you know, that comes not because I knew what to do, it's just I was too busy to be a helicopter mom. But I'm very proud that my children are independent. Just yesterday we had a bullying incident on the bus, and this morning when I came down to breakfast, my son was looking through the directory, he's 7, and I said, what are you doing? He goes, I'm writing down Mrs. Goldberg's email just in case there is another incident on the bus today. And Mrs. Goldberg is in charge of the kids on the bus. And I said, honey, I'll handle that. He's like, that's okay, Mom. I can email her.
Wow.
Yeah,
7?
at 7.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, so I was really impressed that, you know, he wanted to take on this responsibility for himself.
Yeah, the last speaker that I went to see talked about our generation of parenting as raising, what did she say, handicapped royalty. Treating our kids like they're handicapped royalty. So I think the fact that your daughter turned to you and said, you're not a helicopter parent is a huge compliment in this
Again, it's my pure luck.
Yeah.
But also, I do feel that it is a handicap when you don't allow them to try new things and do things on their own and have a sense of independence. I don't agree with, you know, everybody's great. I'm like, okay, in life there are winners, and it's okay to declare a winner. So I don't like what's happening, and I don't raise my children that way.
What are some of the things you do to add convenience to your life, just to make your days go smoother? You know, whether it's delegating or saying, I'm not going to bake brownies for the bake-a-thon.
Yeah, I think saying no is the first way, and really understanding who you are and accepting yourself, and not feeling guilty about it. Because, okay, once we did have to bake, and actually my daughter likes to bake, so I said, hey, do you want to do this? You know, and she's like, sure. So we managed together. You know, it's a good way to involve the family. As far as conveniences, I love my BlackBerry. Now that I know I can buy an unlocked iPhone, I might have to get it for the Siri thing. I think that's really cool. But the BlackBerry is what changed my life in my business and in my personal life. You know, again, to emphasize my non-perfection. I once was in London, and it was 3 a.m., and I got a phone call from school because between my husband at the time, my nanny, and my assistant, they all forgot to pick up my daughter from school. But the school tracked me down in London. Yeah, so, because I always have it on. And I've gotten a lot better. I think that's one of the things that I've gotten better about is to be able to turn it off in pockets of time of the day. But I still wake up, the first thing I do is like look at the screen. I wear glasses, so. But a girlfriend of mine, one of my best friends, B.O.B., stayed with me on one of my New York trips, and she said I fell asleep with my BlackBerry like this. And she had to pry the BlackBerry out of my hand, and the position was still the same. So, and then, of course, I'm fortunate to have a great nanny, and my kids are very independent, and it's funny, these days I work out of my home, so I emphasize to them, okay, you can't interrupt me when I'm on a phone call because it could be a very important business call. So one day I get my two boys coming up with a sign that says, "I'm hungry." Because they weren't allowed to speak. It was so funny. My parents raised us like weeds. They had no idea what we were doing. It was incredible that all four girls grew up so well, because we would literally just disappear and then show up at dinner time. Never explain where we were going. I was on the tennis court, but I was a good kid. And then there's, as you said, there's the other extreme of, literally, I've seen this at my daughter Fences, and there's a nanny there that spoon feeds the 8-year-old food while she's doing homework, waiting for a lesson. Yeah, I was like, whoa. So, but my theory was always, I have intelligent children. If they're hungry, I hope they're intelligent enough to speak up somehow to let me know. So you won't find me hovering over them going, "Are you hungry yet? Are you hungry yet?" It's sort of, food is nutrition.
And they're creative, because if they can't say it,
they'll write it.
Not to at all focus on the negative, but we've heard a lot about the ways, that you manage your life in, positive ways. What are some things that you try to avoid? Avoid doing or avoid, just in general?
Since my daughter's in the room, I can't say it, but, bad people. I think that's one of the, negative people, gossiping, people with a lot of envy and jealousy, people who aren't generous with their network, with their wisdom. I think those are really just big red flags I run away from these days.
And did it take you a long time to get to this point of doing that, or have you always sort of known that those were things that...
As I said, I think I started to get wrapped up in that whole scene, and it was very superficial, the name dropping and this and that, but there was no substance. As someone said, how many people can you call and actually talk to them if they thought you couldn't really do anything for them? And I saw that a lot, a lot of my friends went away after I sold the company and no longer could provide them a job, for example. So that gave me, it was a good correction. It was a very good correction.
Yeah, that'd be a wake-up call. Some of the, so many questions I want to ask you, but some of the things that we found in doing these interviews is that many people say, being respectful of others adds to their own quality of life, or, pays dividends to them, and also being a good listener. to other people? Are those things that you find as well?
Yes, thank you for reminding me. That's definitely true. Listening is so important, and recently I was around somebody who really didn't listen very much, and you can see why his life hasn't really gelled the way it should, because he has all of the components, of looks and intelligence, but the fact that he wasn't really listening, I thought, wow, this is really making a difference. I think listening is a way of being respectful and being generous. And, I find it fascinating. I'm one of those people that strangers will tell me the wildest things because they sense that I'm genuinely interested. Recently I met someone who is a CEO of a publicly traded company, and after an hour he said, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone else?" And he told me something very personal and it had to do with his purpose in life. And I think it's because he sensed that I wasn't judgmental, because I'm not. Because I accept myself and I accept you. You are who you are, and there's no judgment. There's no need to judge. And I'm genuinely interested. And for the right people, I do care. And this is why I think 10 years ago I would have said, I care about everyone. But I think we have to be mature and say, some people don't deserve your caring. And you have to really manage and give out your time to the right people. Otherwise, they just really suck you dry. I feel that being organized in your thoughts and planning and persistence has also been a key factor.
And do
in my life.
you set up your week in a way where you carve out time for organization and?
Yeah, that's part of the alone time too.
Your own time.
Yeah. It's so crucial, at least for me. I do know some people who don't like to be alone, but I really thrive from being alone. I like being alone.
And did you find that after you left your company,
Mm-hmm.
you maybe didn't even realize how much you enjoyed? Because it doesn't sound like you were ever alone.
Exactly.
You were traveling 220 days,
Yeah, I
and
never
then
had
you
time
had
to
kids,
myself.
I imagine,
That's right.
So did you find that it was just completely acted as fuel for you?
Yes, and it was a part of myself I didn't know about until I had a minute to sit and go, oh wait, I really enjoy this. And I'm not too exhausted to realize that. So now I'm very careful. So I will, the last weekend was really heavy duty social, so I turned down engagements until today. So and then this weekend is very much family time, because that's what I enjoy.
What are some of the things, if you were to write a manual of happiness, that you would put in that manual?
Definitely what I said about, and I wish I could remember who had the quote, but happiness is not getting what you want, but liking what you have. I like my body now. It's not perfect. I didn't eat great this last week. Actually, it's been since December. I've got to get back on track. But okay, you know what? It is what it is. I will treat my body better starting, actually today. I started drinking green tea lattes now. So, it's just accepting who you are. I am very, for example, on the material side, if you told me that I would be in the home that I am in now for the rest of my life, I'd be thrilled. I no longer have that desire, and I have a beautiful home, but it's certainly not huge, and it's certainly not small. It's just a lovely home, but I don't have this need any longer to say to myself, well, but I want a 20,000 square foot home with gates and all that. those things are no longer really, I realize that's not going to make me happy. So I think that's the main key thing. Let me see, what else did I write down? Okay. Be generous and respectful with others and yourself. Know your priorities and be strong in your convictions and values. I think that's really important. And that takes time. I don't think you start off really knowing yourself unless you're an exception. I think it takes time to really discover who you are. Keep your word as much as you can. This is so important to me because had Mrs. Koenig not called back when she said, we would have been stuck in that camp for a long time. Help others who are deserving without expecting anything back. This has never backfired on me. I feel that if you don't expect anything back, somehow it always just works out. And I've known people for, let's say, 4 or 5 years. I never expected anything from them, and suddenly we have a business thing going on. You just never know. Go ahead.
I was going to say, what are your priorities right now? Speaking of like having priorities, making priorities. What would you say they are right now for 2012?
Well, I am buying back my brand and relaunching in a very new way. I was telling Kit that for the last 3 years, everyone's been like, oh, why don't you buy back the brand and continue the shoes? And I knew I wasn't passionate about that. And that's the other thing I forgot to put down in happiness is, find something you're really passionate about, or find lots of things you're passionate about, but really live engaged and not just let life go by. But anyway, so in this time that I was hanging out with all of the techie, mostly guys, I've learned a lot about technology, and I realized that I have a mission now to create a fashion brand where fashion and technology intersects. So it could be in many different categories, anything from continuing to innovate our shoes. There's some very interesting materials that's out there. One of which is it's lighter than air. It's less dense than air. Can you imagine that? So very exciting things. To making handbags that light up on the inside. To creating eyewear that has, now we have microprocessors that are small enough and getting cheap enough that we can actually create eyewear that's smart eyewear. So imagine going on vacation and you can buy glasses to read the signs all in English, even if you're in China.
Oh, wow.
Or, like for me, because I never remember people's name, facial recognition, so that if I'm looking at you, you can see their name coming across. And if the microprocessor gets good enough, you can list their children and things like that. There's an exciting company that I'd like to partner with where you can change your prescription just with sliding the control on the temple, or with movement. It can tell whether you're what you're trying to look at. So some very exciting things happening in technology, but what the tech guys don't get is that, in particular, women will always want fashion. So the fashion industry will never die. We always want to look good. We always want to look desirable. So beauty is still very important, and I think that's where Steve Jobs got it so right, and so many of his customers are women, because he understood that beauty and aesthetics is very important, particularly to women. That the technology that I just described exists, but no one has put it into the fashion context. So my dream now is to have stores around the country that is like a cross between the Apple store and a high fashion boutique, where you combine those two worlds that I love. So I have really quite a brand new purpose, and I've learned my lessons from my mistakes from the first time, in the sense that I'm recruiting a much stronger team. It's not going to be all me. In fact, I've said I don't want to be CEO. I've held the title before. I don't need to now for my ego. I just want to be known as the founder and then run around and do my thing, which what I'm good at is communicating. I'm good at the vision. I'm good at telling people about the vision. So I want to focus on the aesthetics and the message, but I'm definitely going to have a CEO that can manage the operations and the financing, and of course we'll work alongside each other, but understanding that my mistake the first time is I didn't have a strong enough team. I didn't have a team that, first of all, I was like, we didn't have a plan. I mean, it sounds crazy, but every year we just kept growing, and I just kind of rode that. I had no idea how to plan anything as far as how do we exit cash flow. I mean, it took me a few years to figure out there was a difference between profitability and cash flow. So I was always in trouble. You know, I'd be like, oh, look at how profitable we are. Let's open up another store. And then halfway through, we're like, wait, we don't have enough cash to get through. So you know, I need people on board who are like that, which then will allow me to still lead a life that is not as crazy as before, because I still want to go to the soccer games. I still want to drive to the bus stop every morning and have my routine, because I've discovered that that's what's important, and not running around the world.
Well, thank you so much. I guess we'll end on that question and we'll open it up to our audience to ask any other questions. But thank you. I have a lot to think about.
Yes.
Darren, what in business has made you fearful? Like, not just not meeting the payroll, but things you've had to overcome personally that made your knees knock when nobody knew that they were knocking, but you had to just deal with it to make it, to get over.
Yeah, going up against the unions in Las Vegas.
Whoa.
Because, you know, imagine, like I said, here I thought, okay, I have enough money to open up a store in Las Vegas, and I got the bid. The guy was non-union, it fit my budget, I'm fine. And then about 2 months before we were supposed to open, they said, we're going to shut you down unless you use union men. And I didn't have the money. So I faced them, and I said, listen, I don't have the money. And what ended up happening, how we resolved the situation, was the landlord gave me the money because he didn't want to get in trouble with the unions. So, but it got just basically tacked on to our rent over the 10-year period. But he gave me the cash to finish up the project. I mean, it was in his interest too, because there was a deadline to open. There was like $1 million opening party. Everybody had to be open. So that was kind of scary. But yeah, most of my issues were production and cash flow, really. The sales side was, luckily for us, never a problem. There was always great demand for the product. But that's truly because I didn't go to business school, so I didn't know what I was doing. Yes.
Are the shoes that you're wearing now, are those available in your store?
No. In fact, all of my stores have closed now. The new owners closed down all the stores, but you know, hopefully when I get it back, we'll have the stores opened up. These were from 2007 period. I know these are. I love these. Thank you. Yes, you've been taking notes.
I've got 12 pages of notes.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yes, I always take copious notes. Thank you so much for your largesse of spirit
It's my pleasure, and I feel the energy in the room. So
I'm sure there were times when you were discouraged, because that's human. What did you do in those? How did you believe in yourself, or how did you get through that?
there were times throughout my life where I was on my knees crying. One time in front of my employees, I just said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. But many moments in private, from anything from one time, my longest case that I was in was 27 hours in surgical case, and then I had to go on call. So basically I didn't sleep for 50 hours. And I got home and just dropped to my knees and started bawling. I didn't know what else to do because it's one of those situations where you're so tired you can't sleep. And I think from just very personal moments where I'm like, I don't think I can do this. So I would get on my knees and I would pray. And I'm not a religious person in the sense of organized religion. I'm spiritual, and we didn't really touch on that. But I do feel that you should have components of your life that are spiritual. And I think I've gotten more spiritual in the last 3 years because I had the time. And so some of my quiet moments is just, as I say, putting it out there to the universe, listening to the universe, listening to your heart, trying to find that voice. And really, sometimes the problems are so overwhelming, a lot of times you really can't do anything about it anyway, so you just pray. And then what happens is that hopefully in the next few days, something new will be revealed, some new information, and then eventually you figure things out. So, and that's, luckily, I think in medicine you're taught that sense of tenacity because you don't want to give up on your patients. So what you try to do is keep them alive long enough so hopefully, even if it seems hopeless, because hopefully there will be a cure or a new treatment that will keep them alive for longer.
Do you think your spirituality increased your own relationship with yourself?
Yes, definitely. My kids are very special because we traveled all over the world, and I asked them once, what would be the one place you'd like to go back to? And they all said Borobudur, which is on Java in Indonesia, and we went to the site of the world's oldest Buddhist, they call it a temple, but it's not really a temple because it's not enclosed. It's basically, imagine a wedding cake outdoors, and you climb up various levels of the wedding cake until you reach the top. And it represents the levels of enlightenment that you have. And it was there where I saw, okay, wow, this is very peaceful, and I watched the monks pray and chant, and there was something very peaceful about how they were conducting their lives. And this was like right after I sold, so I was still in that frenzy. And besides noticing that, they had the cool one-shoulder look going, I saw fashion. Yeah, I'm always noticing the fashion. I was like, wow, they look at how they're conducting their lives and finding such peace. And the first step to that was acceptance. So I started reading a little bit more about Buddhism. My family's Buddhist, but we don't really practice. But definitely there's a lot about acceptance of yourself and others. And I think that's why people sense a generosity of spirit in me, because I truly believe that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
As someone with really bad feet,
Yes.
I was really happy to hear about you. And you have such great ideas, and I'm just wondering how you used your training as an orthopedic surgeon to do the shoes, what you look for, what specifically they are supposed to help, and
Sure.
you were really the first one who did anything with attractive shoes.
Right.
There are comfortable shoes out there, but
Yeah.
they're not better than tennis shoes.
Well, luckily my mother is very fashionable, and that rubbed off on me. And you know, she like steps out of a refugee camp and goes to Kmart, and I look back at pictures, and you know, I don't think she even went to Kmart. I think they were like clothes given to her, and she looked so chic. You know, she always had that sense of style, and that rubbed off on me for sure. So that was the aesthetic side. From the functionality side, when I was a resident, I did a research project in diabetic shoes. And the reason being, diabetics have neuropathy, which means their nerve endings, they have less sensation. So when they are in a pair of uncomfortable shoes, they can't feel that blister forming, they can't sometimes even feel there's a tack inside their shoes. So they have to be very careful with their footwear, otherwise they start to get ulcerations, and then it actually can lead to an amputation, because once they get an ulceration, it's difficult to treat the infection because they have a lower immune system as well. So this was a not glamorous part of orthopedics for sure, but I felt like, wow, you know, this is a very important part, because what we found was that the reason people were not wearing shoes that were properly made was because they were so ugly. So my project was to work, we were supported by Nike, to create shoes that were attractive yet safe enough for diabetics. So it was from that whole experience that I learned how to make a shoe. And what I do for the fashion shoes is many different features in them. The last, which is the mold around which it's made, the shape of the shoe, it's always enough room for a real foot. Most shoes I find are made for Barbie's feet or as sculpture. Because somehow I ended up in another field where it's mostly men. You know, it's male designers who don't actually have to walk with them. I walked in all of my shoes, so I knew how they felt. I used a cushioning product called Poron, which is used in diabetic footwear, and it's a very high-end shock absorber. It's used in many industries, including NASA, and that cushioned the foot. I made sure the shoes were lightweight, they were flexible, and they were soft. So all of these little features that create that kind of moment when you put them on. And this is a big compliment to me. My daughter, who's 12, is always stealing my shoes.
The shoes you're wearing now are comfortable?
Oh yeah, definitely. I walked in these for 8 hours in New York. You know, it's so funny because my daughter keeps taking my shoes. I'm like, why are you taking my shoes? I got you shoes. And she's like, oh yeah, but these are so much more comfortable. And she's only 12, so that's a compliment.
Well, one more question.
Do you still practice medicine? And if not, do you have a desire to?
It's funny, if you talk to my mom, I get emails once a month from her. Why aren't you going back? There's this opportunity, this and that. She still doesn't get it. No, I don't practice medicine. You know, I never say never. I don't see it in the next 5 years, but certainly I think I would like to do it maybe overseas as a volunteer, things like that. Certainly, I like using my medical knowledge. I get a lot of calls from friends. I'm like a concierge, the medical concierge, you know. Who's the best surgeon? Just today I got a call from the owners of Michael's restaurant. Their son is having surgery, and she's like, what will be the recovery like? What should I be prepared for? So I get a lot of calls from friends and acquaintances.
Where did you make your shoes?
In Italy.
Oh.
So I went to Italy a lot, yes. That was probably part of my 40 pounds. Was it all worth it?
I have a question.
Yes, Kim.
So you made a comment, something along the lines of, being thoughtful in how you communicate, something along those lines. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. So maybe as it relates to relationships, or maybe you're going in the direction of, being more, deliberate in how you communicate in certain situations, or I was curious what you meant.
I think I'm quite bothered by the culture of people saying things they don't really mean. It's like you hear so often, "Oh, why don't you come over?" And they're shocked when I actually call. Because I'm the type of person, if I don't want you over, I'm never going to say, "Come on over." I just won't say it. I'm not going to tell you I like, your scarf, but I don't really mean it. So I don't know why we've become this very superficial culture where people don't say what they mean. And then the other thing is talking about stuff that don't matter. Like, who cares if Kim Kardashian is doing whatever she's doing? That's not one of my guilty pleasures, and it's a shame that we spend as a society time on the Kardashians and Jersey Shores when we have huge issues in this country to deal with. Who cares about Snooki when we're basically going through a revolution in our workforce, because the economy is suffering not only from the banking situation, but it's because we're now down to 10% manufacturing jobs, and those jobs aren't going to come back. And we have a whole group of, especially young adults, that need jobs in the service industry, and we need to somehow create those jobs. If this is the same analogy as during the Great Depression, it was that transition of going from a farming society to a manufacturing society. And we're going through that, and we just have such big issues to tackle. Why are we wasting time as individuals and as a society on things that don't matter?
We have one last question
I
right
just had
here.
a quick question. First,
Sure.
I want to say thank you for your candor. It's very refreshing. And I wanted to just ask you, a lot of times when you've been successful in one field and you're transitioning to something else or taking some time, there's a lot of pressure, maybe outside pressure, maybe not in your case, but to do the next big thing before you're really ready, like to not lose momentum or to keep going and not take that time. How did you have the confidence to take the time that you needed before you decided, okay, I'm ready to go back, I'm ready to do this, I'm kind of in that space where I'm taking my time and I'm feeling a little bit of like, the pressure of eyes on me, like what you gonna do next, what you gonna do next. And if you have any sort of skills or tools that you use to keep yourself grounded.
I think my inner voice just said, kept saying, not yet, not yet. And then one day, when I figured out my place for the next phase, with the cross-section of technology and fashion, it just became so clear. It was like, oh my gosh, this is so obvious. And yet, while I was reading about technology and wondering what, how this could be applied to my life, in even up until 2 months ago, I had no clue. I was just curious. I was just a seeker of knowledge, and I just wanted to hang out with people who talked about cool stuff and not the Kardashians. So, these guys wouldn't know an it bag if you hit them over the head with it.
Right.
They didn't care. So it was so refreshing to be around people who were like that. And I just did it because I found it substantive. I didn't know what was gonna happen until it became clear, yeah. But yeah, I think listening to your heart, and really only do something if you have true conviction. I wasn't convicted before when people said, oh, just, do the shoes again. I was like, oh, I've done it for 10 years. It's no longer a challenge.
Well, thank you.
I'm sorry?
Have you thought about writing a book?
Yes, I've been asked, and I don't think I'm ready yet. My inner voice hasn't, maybe after the next phase. And I think it'll probably be a series of books, but it probably won't be a book about relationships. I'm not too good at that. Well, the funny thing is, I told my divorce attorney, I said, I'm never getting married again. And she deadpans, rolls her eyes, she goes, I've heard that before. But I think, maybe the third time will be a charm, not because of anything other than I know myself better now. And I know how to say no. So when I do say yes, I hope it'll be the right choice. So, but I have no regrets. I have great children, and I had great experiences with both my marriages, as well as not so good, obviously. So, but maybe there's something to be learned from that as well. I know you probably want to go, but real quickly, I had a period where I felt like, wow, what's wrong with me? 2 divorces, geez. And then I started reading works by Helen Fisher. She's an anthropologist with a particular interest in love and marriage. And what she wrote was that actually back in our ancestral days, women tended to have multiple partners throughout their lives. Because we were hunter-gatherers, so as gatherers, we would go from village to village and have the opportunity to meet men. And I asked her once, well, what did the children do? And she said, well, they were part of the village took care of them. So because I said, well, if divorce is so awful, then, how did we manage to get from hunter-gatherers to here? And that was her answer. And it wasn't until the agricultural economy that women were tied. We could no longer pick up and go. So it was a different dynamic then. And then her hypothesis is that now that women are in the workforce, that's why the divorce rate has gone up so high. It wasn't because our moral standards have dropped. It was because our economic power changed. When you are bringing just as much to the table, you have that power. So then I was like, oh, I'm just returning to my ancestral ways. Yes.
But you are getting back into the shoes again?
Yes. Yeah.
Will that be anytime soon?
Well, the shoes are out now at Bloomingdale's, but they're not directly affiliated with me. But I plan on getting everything back and organizing, doing it the way I'd like to see it. But the shoes now are good. I consulted on that, so they.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for
Thank you,
coming.
everyone.